You know those shows you binge watch, the ones you might call a guilty pleasure? Well, what if a show like Jersey Shore could actually unlock a way deeper understanding of our entire culture? Let's dive in and see.
Yeah, that's an actual quote from the slang that the show made famous. It's pretty shocking, right? But it's also our way in, our starting point for a surprisingly deep look at what was really going on inside that house on the Jersey Shore.
And we're not talking about some small, niche show here. At its peak, almost 9 million people were tuning in every single week. This wasn't just television, it was a massive cultural force, and that alone makes it worth a closer look.
So, okay, with millions of people watching, what were they actually seeing? Let's start with our first layer of analysis. What was happening inside the world of the show? Well, some researchers actually decided to study the show, and they focused on one core behavior, shaming. They defined it really simply. Basically, any negative verbal remark that criticized someone's appearance, their actions, or who they were.
And when they crunched the numbers, they found something pretty fascinating. You see, while insults like grenade got all the headlines, that was only part of the story. Almost 73% of the shaming was just simple name-calling. It was constant. It was the baseline for how the cast talked to each other.
So what was driving all of this? I mean, to really understand the power dynamics going on, we can use this academic framework called hegemonic masculinity. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's really just a way of describing the unspoken social rules that make certain hypermasculine behaviors seem normal or even expected.
And honestly, the show is like a perfect case study for this idea. Think about it. The gym, tan, laundry mantra. The fact that bar fights were just a normal part of a night out, rating women on a scale from 1 to 10, the massive double standards, it was all a performance of this very specific, very powerful brand of masculinity.
But this whole phenomenon wasn't just an American thing. If we hop across the Atlantic, the UK's version, Geordie Shore, popped up as a response to a totally different social reality.
To really get Geordie Shore, we need a new concept, social abjection. This is the process where a society basically defines itself by pointing to a specific group, in this case, working-class youth, and casting them as revolting, or kind of like social waste. It's a way of drawing a line in the sand about what's acceptable. And you can see that clash so clearly right here. On one side, you've got the ideal modern citizen, responsible, thinking about the future, in control. And on the other side, the Geordie persona, totally excessive, shameless, living only for right now. It's a complete and total rejection of what mainstream society was telling them to be.
And this is absolutely crucial. This isn't just mindless partying. For young people who are in a really shaky economic position, this performance of being too much, the hyper-glamour, the hyper-sex, all of it, is actually a form of work. It is a strategic, if maybe unconscious, way of making yourself visible and valuable when other options just aren't there.
But that raises a bigger question, right? How did we even get to a place where that kind of performance becomes a real job? To understand that, we have to zoom the lens way, way out and look at the bigger historical picture.
Let's go all the way back to 1958. The cultural critic Raymond Williams wrote this, and he was describing this really rich, community-based, working-class culture. He saw something incredibly valuable in it, something built on solidarity and people looking out for each other.
But at the exact same time, another thinker, Richard Hoggard, saw a huge threat on the horizon. He called it mass culture. And he was describing this new, commercialized, kind of superficial culture that was starting to replace that authentic community life Williams was talking about.
Hoggart described this new mass culture as having an emotional poverty and a sincere insincerity. I mean, hearing that now, it's pretty hard not to see reality TV as the perfect modern-day example of exactly what he was warning us about all those years ago.
And this brings us to our final and maybe most philosophical layer of this whole thing, and it comes to us from the writer David Foster Wallace.
So Wallace argued that by the 1990s, irony, that detached, cynical, too cool for school attitude, it used to be a way to rebel. But it had been completely co-opted by mass media. It had lost all its power, and all it was creating was cynicism and making people feel alone.
Now, to really get Wallace's solution to this problem, we have to understand this really crucial difference. Authenticity is all internal. It's about being true to your inner self. Sincerity, on the other hand, is external. It's all about the intent to connect truthfully with other people.
So, this leads us to a pretty wild and provocative question. Could the raw, the unfiltered,
The often incredibly messy behavior we see on a show like Jersey Shore, could it actually be a radical attempt at sincerity in a world that's just drowning in irony? A desperate attempt to be real with other people, not just for yourself.
Okay, we've gone from very specific behaviors all the way out to some deep philosophy. Now it's time to tie all of these threads together and see the big picture.
So remember our journey? We decoded the behavior on the show, then we understood the wider social context, then we traced the historical roots of this cultural moment, and finally, we explored the deep philosophy behind it. It's a complete funnel of analysis. And all of that brings us to this final, synthesized takeaway. These reality stars aren't just acting out. What we are actually watching is a complex performance. It's a form of labor that is happening right at the intersection of class, gender, economics, and a deep, powerful cultural hunger for genuine connection.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to chew on. Are these stars simply the products of a culture in decline? Or are they, in their own messy, chaotic way, actually pioneers of a new and radical kind of sincerity? What do you think?